Hi, Russ Ryden with Devoted Golfer TV. We're at the Byron Nelson. It's 2012 and it's practice day. I was out here last year with Michael Garrett from UST, and we were talking about the VTS fitting system. This year we've got a new product. It's called Elements. Tell me, what have we got new here?
Well, this is our ATTAS Elements. Again, our ATTAS is our international brand, but the Elements is a combination of several of our different research studies, and it combines the work that we found in the torque story in the VTS. It also combines a new story relative to the mid-flex section. As we did our research with Ralph last year, we identified how the butt, the mid, and the tip, the torque, the balance point, all those things affect player performance.
Now Ralph's research was in order of importance. We were tip, mid, torque, butt.
Correct.
And so last year you addressed the torque element of that.
Correct.
And now with the Elements, we're addressing the midsection element. Is that correct?
We're addressing the mid, but we're also incorporating some of those other things that you said, like torque. The mid-flex, we found that, like you stated, the tip is the very most important relative to the launch angle and spin rate, or the dynamic part of the shaft. But if it's not combined with a proper midsection, you get a lot of instability in the shaft. And we found that by taking the midsection and stabilizing the midsection, you get a reduction in droop and dynamic loft. And so by spreading the midsection out and actually taking the midsection and making it more stable through a bigger portion of the shaft, you get a lot more tip performance, or reaction of the tip stability.
Michael, Elements. What exactly do you mean by Elements?
Elements is exactly what it means. It's a part of a little bit of everything. And the ATTAS, being our international brand, our very high-end shaft, we've then taken that and put elements of our research into it. So we've looked at the research we've done with Ralph Mann. We've been able to identify the different aspects of the shaft: the butt, the mid, the tip, the torque, the balance point. And we've identified how important those are in performance. And so what we've done with the Elements is we've taken a little bit of all these elements and put them together in a shaft combination of DK, RK, and MK, the three different shaft profiles, and given you a combination of shaft flex, torque, and balance point that really fits players in those three buckets. So you have your low launching, your mid launching, and your high launching players. Now we've got a shaft that will fit these players, but with all these elements put together, and not just one profile.
Michael, last week when I was in the UST R&D Center here in Fort Worth, we were talking about this shaft, and you mentioned counterbalancing. Tell me a little about counterbalancing on the Elements and what you found there.
Well, counterbalancing has been, there's been many people within the industry for years that have been big proponents of counterbalancing.
Balance certified, for one.
Balance certified. Barney Adams when I was at Adams was a big advocate of counterbalancing, and there's been several people within the industry, and not sure what happened along the way, but a lot of players got turned off from counterbalancing. So people don't really talk about it too much anymore. But if you really look at a lot of the shafts that are out there, in our competitor shafts, especially in the Japanese product, there's a lot of counterbalancing out there in shafts. I don't want to mention the brands, but some of the best players in the world, the top 10, I would say probably 8 of them are playing counterbalance shafts. So
counterbalance shaft as opposed to putting the balance certified weight plugs in the butt.
Correct, yeah, it's designed into the shaft. So a normal shaft, if you look at the balance point, a normal shaft is 46 inches. Your balance point would be in the middle at 23. That would be a standard balance. Well, we move it towards the butt about 1.5 inches. Then it becomes a counterbalance shaft.
So you're looking at 24.5, 25-inch balance point on the shaft.
Exactly.
And what are you finding with counterbalance shafts as opposed to a lower balance point?
Well, we're finding a better dispersion. The shaft is working more with the player. Now, again, not everyone will benefit from that. Some players like to feel the weight more in the tip, and they perform better that way, and you see player to player. I would say it's probably 50-50. I would say there's probably 50% of the players that like more tip weighting, and 50% of the players that like counterbalance. And a lot of players don't know they have a counterbalance shaft. And if you tell them they did, they'd probably get spooked.
Right.
So that's why it's downplayed. But I think it's a very important part of fitting that this is offered to players, that they should be able to feel that. And again, if you look at the top players in the world, a lot of people are playing counterbalance shafts.
Well, by what you said, you're going to put new emphasis on counterbalancing. You realize that?
Correct. Yes.
Your research with Ralph Mann as I recall, the order of importance was tip, mid, torque, butt. So now with the elements, we're addressing the midsection because you have three different profiles. Is that correct?
Correct. Yes, the research we're finding with Ralph, as we said, that the torque element of the shaft had been overlooked or understated for years. In fact, downplayed, because lower torque is better, and we found that higher torque in the right shaft profile works for a lot of players and actually is better for many players. To your point, the butt, mid, and tip, the tip being the most important, we found that by stabilizing the midsection, that the tip performance actually gets enhanced. So if you have the wrong combination between the mid flex and the tip flex, you're liable to get a shaft that's very, for lack of a better word, squirrely. It's very inconsistent.
Squirrely. I like that word.
Yeah. So what we've done with the ATTAS elements, and again, the elements, the ATTAS is our international brand, and the elements speaks to the different elements within the shaft, like the torque, the mid flex, balance point, those types of things. And so this shaft kind of combines a lot of the little elements that we found in our research into this profile. The midsection of this shaft has been enhanced or stabilized in a bigger profile. So we basically, normally in the shaft, we measure the midsection somewhere in here, but we found that by spreading that out and actually stabilizing the mid part of the shaft, you actually get a better performing, more stable shaft from an orbiting standpoint, and orbiting being the drooping and the dynamic loft that's created every time a player swings it. So by really stabilizing the midsection of the shaft, you're almost mitigating the orbiting by 30%. So you're getting a more consistent impact or delivery of the head at impact. And again, it doesn't take away from the tip performance, but it actually helps the tip to perform better by having a more stable midsection.
So we've got three different versions of this, D, M, and R.
Correct.
How do they differ from each other?
Yes, we have the DK, the RK, and the MK. The DK is your higher launching, higher spinning product. It allows, it's a softer midsection, but again, a stable one in comparison to the competition, even to our prior products. And the RK is your kind of your mid-launch, mid-spin, and the MK is your low-launch, low-spin. It's the beefier of the three.
So we have last year's research from the VTS system. How did you incorporate torque into these three different profiles?
Good question. We realized that different player profiles, for example, players that have different launch conditions, are actually looking for a different feel in their shaft. And so a player that is someone who needs to get the ball in the air will actually benefit from a medium torque, somewhere in the 3 to 3.5 range. So that's what the DK has. We did tests with the three torques and the shafts. We found that seemed to fit those players the best. The RK being the
so the DK being
the highest launch,
high launching. So when a high launching shaft, we're going to have a mid range of torque.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes. And the RK being in the middle of the two has a very, very stiff midsection, but a little softer tip, similar to the tip in the DK. Actually has a lower torque. But we find that player profile is kind of in the middle, needs a little bit of a lower torque. And we tested again both the high and low with that and found that was the best combination with that player. The MK being the stiffest profile, very, very stiff mid, very, very stiff tip. Actually, players preferred the higher torque, that is contradictory to what we believed in the past.
That's contradictory to every other shaft design on the planet, isn't it?
Correct. Everyone's been lower torque, lower torque, lower torque.
Well, as we get stiffer and heavier, we get less torque.
Correct.
And you're saying that's not exactly right.
Exactly. And we found that on tour. A lot of the players that have really strong builds, really aggressive swings, really need a stiff profile, a really stiff mid, a really stiff tip, but need a little bit more torque because it actually gives them feel and it allows them to curve the ball and shape the ball. And so I think we've done a really good job of identifying the proper torque with each one of the shaft profiles going into this ATTAS element.
So there it is, the TOS element story. Where would I get the TOS element other than here on tour?
Yeah, the only place you can get it is in the tour trailers or at your local Tour Specs dealer. The exclusive distributorship that we've developed across the country with many dealerships, you guys that do custom fitting and custom fitting only, are places you can go get the ATTAS elements.
Well, thanks.
Oh, you're welcome.
See you next year.
You bet.